Thank you, Minister. We'll move to question time. Senator Hume.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. Before the 2022 election, the Prime Minister was tweeting photographs of petrol prices at $1.79, $1.85 and $1.91 a litre, demanding action from the Coalition. Today, Australians filling up at Melbourne, Sydney or Brisbane, and including Darwin, are paying closer to $2.20 per litre. Minister, if $1.79 a litre petrol was a national outrage when Labor was in opposition, why is $2.20 per litre apparently acceptable now that Labor is in government?
Thank you, Senator Hume. Minister Wong.
So, Senator Hume, I assume you are aware that there is a conflict in the Middle East. And I assume you are aware that that conflict is wider than has been anticipated. It's a conflict that has seen Iran attack some 12 countries in the Middle East. It has seen Iran attack hydrocarbon infrastructure in the Middle East, and Iran issue public threats over the Straits of Hormuz. Now, we are confident in the fuel holdings that Australia has. So I would make that point, despite the fear-mongering by some opposite. But what I would also say, Senator Hume, is that that question demonstrates the approach that your parties have taken for too many days in relation to this conflict, which is where the nation looks to bipartisanship. The nation looks to there being less politics and more public interest, where the nation looks to the parties of government behaving as such. We see yet again those opposite for too long seeking to make politics out of this crisis. Now, I would make this point. We saw Mr Taylor, the member for Hume, stand up, as I understand it, just before question time, belatedly giving some bipartisan support, and I welcome that. I welcome that. A little bit late, but that's okay. We welcome it because I actually think that most Australians think this might actually be a time to try and look to the national interest. And that is the invitation to the opposition. Why don't you try just for once to look to national interest rather than petty political interest?
The time for answering has expired. Senator Hume, first supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. Higher petrol prices are now compounding the pain for families who are already suffering under Labor's homegrown cost of living crisis. Higher mortgages, higher electricity bills and higher grocery bills, a cost of living crisis that existed long before the conflict in Iran. Minister, why has your government spent 3 years increasing government expenditure, fuelling inflation, weakening household budgets and leaving Australians exposed to exactly this kind of shock?
Thank you, Senator Hume. Minister Wong.
This from the former Shadow Finance Minister, whose legacy would have been more debt, higher deficits and higher taxes. I mean, really, Senator Hume, for you to ask a question on that when you are, and I invite you to read the election review. I invite you to read the election review because I would remind you that the policy you are personally responsible
Minister
for—
Wong, please resume your seat. Just a moment. Senator McKenzie. Senator Hume.
On relevance, President, the question was about the cost of living crisis under Labor's homegrown inflation.
Thank you, Senator Hume. Minister Wong, I will draw you back to Senator Hume's question.
Senator, you are the one— well, with respect, Senator Hume, you raised the issue of government spending, and you are making an assertion about government spending. Now, there are a couple of responses to that. The first is we invite you to tell us what you would cut. We invite you to do that. But secondly, if you cared so much about government spending, Senator Hume, why did you go to an election with higher deficits and higher debts?
Thank you.
Why would you?
Thank you, Minister Wong. Order. Senator Hume, before I call you for your second supplementary, I do need to hear the minister, and you were yelling more loudly than the minister. Second supplementary.
Thank you, President. The Prime Minister clearly cared about petrol prices when they were politically useful to him in opposition. Now that Australians are paying more under Labor, what's he actually going to do about bringing prices down, rather than forcing families to carry yet another cost in Labor's homegrown cost of living crisis?
Thank you, Senator Hume. Minister Wong.
Thank you. Well, ministers are in daily contact with fuel retailers and suppliers to ensure that supplies of diesel and fuel are getting to where they need to go. We are also watching fuel prices closely. Well, there's the interjection from Senator McKenzie, who is first amongst those to politicise the crisis. They're first amongst those to criticise the crisis. It's unsurprising you're there, and it's unsurprising the representation of the Nationals in the Senate. But if I may return to where I was.
Minister Wong. Senator McKenzie, this is not a debate. It's question time, and the minister needs to be heard in silence. Minister Wong.
I will go back to fuel prices. I again say what the Treasurer and other ministers have said. Retailers should not be using these events in the Middle East to price gouge. Senator McKenzie, I am trying to answer the question. And occasionally it would be good—
Senator McKenzie, stop the interjections. Minister Wong.
Retailers should not be using events in the Middle East to price gouge Australians, and the ACCC has said they will not hesitate to take action where people are breaking our laws. Now, we are monitoring fuel prices and supply impacted by events in the Middle East. Australians will recall we did cap coal and gas to shield Australians during the Ukraine—
Senator Ciccone.
Thank you very much, President. President, my question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. The conflict in the Middle East continues, with Iran's reprisal attacks targeting now 12 countries. This continues to cause economic and travel disruptions for many nations and people all around the world. Could the Minister please provide an update to the Senate on the conflict and how the Albanese government is responding to the conflict?
Thank you, Senator Ciccone. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. Thanks to Senator Ciccone for the question. And the Albanese government's #1 priority is and always will be to keep Australians safe at home and abroad. This has been a difficult time for Australians in the Middle East. Iran has attacked 12 countries, and we have seen overnight these attacks are escalating. In recent days, Dubai Airport itself has been under fire from Iranian missiles and drones, and since 28 February, more than 27,000 flights to and from the Middle East have been cancelled. I am pleased that as of this morning, some 2,600 Australians have returned on 18 commercial flights, and further services are scheduled in coming days. We know commercial airlines remain the fastest way to help Australians leave the Middle East at scale. I am also advised by airports and airlines that the overwhelming majority of Australian passengers stranded while transiting through the Middle East have now left. However, there are many more Australians still in the region. With the airport closed in Kuwait, we have arranged bus transportation to Riyadh. 2 of those buses have arrived this morning, allowing Australians to continue their journey from there on commercial flights. Similarly, for Australians in Bahrain, DFAT officials are working with our partners on arranging bus transport to Riyadh in coming days. We know getting on buses and planes is a very difficult decision for Australians living in the region. But I would again make the same statement that the Prime Minister and I made this morning. We encourage those who wish to leave to do so now, whilst commercial flights, however limited, remain available. The DFAT Crisis Centre remains activated. The registration portal is open for Australians in Bahrain, Iran, Israel, Kuwait, Qatar, Lebanon and the UAE. We continue to advise do not travel to most destinations in the Middle East.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Ciccone, first supplementary.
Thanks, President, and thank you, Minister. Minister, as you say, the government's #1 priority is to keep Australians safe. Could you please provide an update on how the Albanese government's efforts are undergoing to protect Australians in the region?
Thank you, Senator Ciccone. Minister Wong.
This growing wave of dangerous and destabilising attacks from Iran puts civilian lives at risk, including Australian lives. In response to requests, Australia will deploy an E-7A Wedgetail to the Gulf to help protect and defend Australians and other civilians for an initial 4 weeks, and provide advanced medium-range air-to-air missiles to the UAE. The E-7A Wedgetail can provide long-range reconnaissance capability to help secure airspace, as it recently did as part of our assistance to Ukraine. The Senate will also be aware that the government does not usually disclose specific information regarding Australian personnel on defence operations for operational and security reasons. However, on the 6th of March, the NSC met and the Prime Minister determined it was in the public interest to disclose that 3 Australian personnel were present on a US submarine off the coast of Sri Lanka on 5th of March. We are clear today that Australia is not taking offensive action against Iran, and we are not deploying Australian troops on the ground in Iran.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Ciccone, second supplementary.
As the Prime Minister and Minister Wong have said since the beginning of this conflict, disruptions could go on for some time. What is the government doing to support Australia's interests during this conflict, Minister?
Minister Wong.
Thank you, Senator Ciccone. And you know that our focus has been to do all we can to keep Australians safe and secure at this time, deploying consular teams, providing options to get Australians to safety, ensuring we have fuel reserves, and I again return to what I was asked in the first question of question time, which is to say it is disappointing that the opposition has sought to play partisan politics with so many aspects of this crisis. I note they have belatedly now backed in the government. We saw Senator Patterson pretty flat-footed when he demanded on Thursday that Australia should send aircraft into the Middle East on the same day that I had announced that Australia had already deployed military assets as part of our contingency. No, look at the time of your tweet. You just got it wrong, mate. Shadow Foreign Minister has either deliberately misled the public about travel advice or has exposed that he does not understand how it works. And the shadow, Senator Sharma, suggested repatriating Australians via Cyprus, which has been under drone attack.
Thank you, Minister. Senator O'Sullivan.
Thank you very much, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. Minister, communities in regional Western Australia, including Coolin and Corrigin, are already rationing fuel and shutting pumps to motorists. On what basis does the government continue to claim that there are no supply constraints when country towns are plainly experiencing them right now?
Thank you, Senator O'Sullivan. Minister Wong.
Thank you. Senator, I will respond to that question, which really I think the Minister Bowen responded to in the press conference today, where he said we don't have a supply problem, we do have a demand challenge, where there is greater demand, particularly in some areas than previously. I would encourage, and we see Senator Mackenzie again doing what she often does, which is to try and create fear and misinformation. And I would really encourage the opposition to be very careful about how they handle this issue. Now, in terms of what I am advised, I can say this. We have as much fuel coming through our ports now as we did before the war began. I say that again. We have as much fuel coming through our ports now as we did before the war began. However, we do understand that there are some regions and farmers who are having difficulty getting the fuel that they require. As the Minister said in the press conference with the Prime Minister today, the primary problem is not supply. The primary problem is changes in demand, and you have some responsibility in helping to deal with that. Because if the country engages in spikes in demand because people are panicking, because they are being encouraged to panic by certain shadow ministers and others, that is not a good thing for the market. I wasn't actually looking at you, Senator. I was looking over there. I'm also advised that the Minister for Climate Change and Energy, the Minister for Agriculture and the Minister for Industry are holding talks with suppliers and the farming sector. I believe today, it may be tomorrow, I'll check which is correct, because of concerns, issues raised around diesel, fuel and fertiliser.
Thank you, Minister. Senator O'Sullivan, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Minister, when did the government first become aware that the fuel suppliers were restricting deliveries to customers in regional Western Australia?
Minister Wong.
First, in relation to my first answer, Minister Ayres has just advised me that the meeting has occurred today. The second, I would have to take on notice when we became aware of that. It's obviously not my portfolio, but I would say again, I think there is a distinction between how much supply is coming to Australia and the pattern of demand that the market is responding to, and I really would encourage the opposition to be responsible in their language.
Senator O'Sullivan, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Minister, when Corrigin Roadhouse owner Scott Coppin describes 10 to 15 minimum cars lined up trying to get fuel and filling up jerry cans and says it was like a scene out of a movie, how can the government still claim that there are no supply issues? Why don't you just tell us the truth? Or are you saying that Mr Coppin is wrong?
Thank you, Senator O'Sullivan. Order. 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 Senator Cash. Order across the chamber. Order. Senator Ayres and Senator Cash and Senator O'Sullivan. Honestly, I should not have to call senators name by name to get people to come to order. I should just say order and you come to order. Minister Wong.
A responsible party of government can hold a government to account. A responsible party of government should not engage in misinformation, and that was. The government is being clear. The government is being clear. We have as much fuel coming through our ports now as we did before the war began. The challenge we have is one of demand, and I would again encourage the opposition to behave in a responsible manner as the government. Well,
order.
Senator, I think the minister.
Minister Wong, please resume your seat. I'm waiting for the chamber to come to order. Minister Wong.
I've made clear the position in terms of what is coming into Australia. I also have said, as the minister has said, that we are seeing patterns of demand which differ from the norm. That is obviously going to mean that there are some regions and communities
thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Waters.
Thank you, President. My question's to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Minister Wong. The Australian public does not want to be dragged into Trump and Netanyahu's illegal forever war, a war that has already seen thousands of civilians injured and killed, and the world spiralling into economic chaos and even greater insecurity for the people of Iran and the region. Yet the Labor government has confirmed that we are now sending missiles and troops to the Gulf, directly putting Australians in the line of fire. Is the deployment of these missiles, aircraft or personnel at the direct or indirect request of Donald Trump's administration? How exactly was this decision made?
Thank you, Senator Waters. Minister Wong.
Well, Senator, I would invite you. I know that the Greens political party have a narrative about this. Unfortunately, the facts don't fit the narrative. And I would really encourage you to look at what the Prime Minister and the Defence Minister and myself announced this morning. The Iran.
Senator Whish-Wilson, I'm not. Order.
The first point I'd make is Iran is attacking countries who have not been part of striking Iran. So I would make that point first. So the United Arab Emirates and many of the other Gulf countries have taken part in the strikes on Iran, and they continue to do so. We also have Australians in the region. So you speak of Australian lives. I've made clear we have 115,000 Australians in the region. A large cohort of those are in the United Arab Emirates, where at the commencement of the conflict there were 24,000. The deployment that we have, the capability that we have announced today is defensive. It is to help Gulf countries protect themselves, their citizens, including Australian citizens who are there, from attack by Iran. We have made clear that we are prepared to take defensive action. These assets will operate according to Australian law, Australian policy and Australian directives. I again say what I have said previously. We are not taking offensive action against Iran, and we will not be deploying Australian troops on them.
Senator Waters.
Yes, a point of order on relevance. The question was, how did this decision to deploy our troops and assets get made? And the minister has not come to that part of the question at all.
Senator Waters. There was also a preamble to that question, and the minister is being directly relevant to the question. Minister Wong.
This is a government decision made through the appropriate government processes.
Senator Waters, first supplementary.
Australia keeps bowing to Trump and Netanyahu's demands. In just over a week, the Labor government has gone from politically supporting this illegal war to refuelling US spy planes and now handing over missiles and troops. How can the government assert that these weapons will be used solely for defensive purposes when they will clearly free up US and Israeli weapons to make further offensive strikes in this illegal war?
Thank you, Senator Waters. Minister Wong.
Well, Senator, this is a defensive capability which is in response, as I said, to requests that we have received from Gulf countries. Now, you might. The problem is, I understand that you want a black and white binary sort of question on this war, and you're entitled to not support it. I appreciate that, but I think it is wrong to try and look at this as if this is a different decision to that which has been announced. What has been announced is a defensive capability responding to the requests to protect Gulf countries from strikes against their citizens, civilians, including civilian infrastructure, airports, in locations where there are Australians. Now, you might want to demonise that, but it is wrong to suggest that this is not a capability that is about defending
time for answering
civilians.
has expired. Senator Waters, second supplementary.
Having now deployed Australians into the war zone, we've learnt that the government is simultaneously shutting the door to all Iranians who've been approved to travel to Australia for things like weddings, funerals, business meetings or holidays. What justification does the government have for resourcing this war but then shutting the door on Iranian people suffering from that war?
Minister Wong.
I think you have seen, particularly in recent days, our view about the people of Iran and the brutality of the Iranian regime. In relation, I assume you're referring to the bill that in Minister Burke's portfolio, and I'm sure Senator Watt can respond as to the rationale for that. Well, Senator, I answer a lot of questions. I'm very happy for Senator Watt to answer questions about the detail of this.
Order.
But I again say, in relation to the primary question, the narrative that the Greens have, the facts don't fit it, and that's the truth.
Senator Darmanin.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. Can the Minister update the Chamber on how the Australian economy is well positioned to manage global economic uncertainty caused by the conflict in the Middle East?
Thank you, Senator Darmanin. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Darmanin for the question, and it's an important one. The escalation of conflict in the Middle East has already seen significant impacts on the global economy, including on uncertainty, which always weighs heavily on markets. When this conflict began, we said we expected to see flow-on effects for the global economy, and we are seeing that play out. Oil is trading at around $90 now, I think last time I looked, but it has got up to almost $120 a barrel yesterday. It was at $60 at the start of the year and about $73 at the start of this conflict. It has come down since yesterday, but remains much higher than it was prior to the conflict beginning. In addition to the comments that Senator Wong has already made, our nation is fuel secure. We are above our minimum petrol stock holding obligations. Petrol companies have informed us that their fuel stock continues to arrive in Australia on time in the quantities that they expect. And we are in this position because the government has acted over the last few years to build resilience. But we know the longer this conflict drags on, the more significant the impact on Australia will be. We had an inflation challenge before these developments, but the conflict in the Middle East risks making that worse, and we will update our inflation forecasts in the budget in the usual way. Markets were especially pessimistic over the last couple of days, but have begun to rebound today in reaction to comments from President Trump. The government and regulators are continuing to monitor the markets and the impact of this volatility closely. While Australia isn't immune to the global instability, we are well positioned, and last week's national accounts showed we had stronger economic growth than any major advanced economy. We've got low unemployment, high participation and strong jobs growth.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Darmanin, first supplementary.
Thank you, Minister. As you've outlined, the Albanese Labor government is closely monitoring developments, including any impact ongoing conflict may have on the cost of living for Australians. What steps is the Albanese Labor government taking to ensure consumers are being protected during this time of global uncertainty?
Thank you, Senator Darmanin. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Darmanin for the supplementary. We've been clear with industry that the international crisis is not a chance to make a quick buck, and we take that seriously. That's why the Treasurer has written to the ACCC to ensure they are monitoring prices and market conduct. The ACCC have issued their own statement putting retailers on notice, and senators will be aware that we increased penalties to up to $50 million for fines, 5 times higher than they were. So we've given the ACCC the tools they need, like extending petrol price monitoring powers and the ability to issue on-the-spot fines. Also, Minister Bowen, Minister Ayres and Minister Collins are convening key representatives from the farming, trucking, fuel and fertiliser industries today to ensure supply chains are well managed, and we will continue to monitor supply shipping and prices of fuel closely, with Minister Bowen convening National Oil Supplies Emergency Committee to ensure all states and territories are ready to respond.
Second supplementary.
Thank you. When this government came to office, we were faced with an energy system that had been mismanaged for a decade. Can the minister explain why building resilience and sovereign capability has been such a high priority for this government?
Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, and I thank Senator Darmanin for the question. Australians can have confidence in Australia's fuel security because we have taken the action we needed to improve the situation from what we inherited. When we came to government, we had seen the closure of 4 of Australia's 6 fuel refineries, and Australia's emergency fuel supplies were located in Texas. The Coalition closed refineries. We've kept them open. The Coalition stored emergency fuel on another continent. We are storing it here. The Coalition talked about minimum stockholding obligations. We implemented them. And the Coalition talked about low-carbon liquid fuels like ethanol. We're investing in them. They've also voted against our coal and gas price caps and energy bill relief for Australians. This is what the decisions we've taken in the last term, over the last few years, have put us in a much stronger position to deal with some of the pressures that we're seeing flow out of the conflict in the Middle East.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Lambie.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is to the Minister of Science and Industry. Big Tech and their mates have been running around this place telling the government that weakening our copyright laws is a price we have to pay for a strong AI industry. What a load of rubbish. Basically, they want to use all of our creative content for free. Channel 9's CEO told the Financial Review last year that AI were crawling Nine's website almost 10 times a second. And that's not innovation, that's called plain-out theft. Minister, your government has said that you won't change our copyright laws and that you will protect Australia's creative industries. Can you reassure Australians that we will stand firm and protect Australian copyright holders?
Thank you, Senator Lambie. Minister Ayres.
Well, thanks, President. Thanks, Senator Lambie. The short answer is yes. The short answer is yes. The longer answer, Senator Lambie, if I might take a little bit of time with the allotted time, is that, of course, artificial intelligence offers Australia significant opportunity. Significant opportunity. And it does come with some risks that it is the government's responsibility to manage. The AI National Plan that the government released at the end of last year, if my memory serves me correctly, had three core components. The first was making sure that we capture the opportunity of artificial intelligence investment here in Australia, whether that's capturing not just for economic reasons but security and strategic reasons as well, as much of the technology stack here in Australia. Secondly, that we spread the benefits throughout the Australian community and make sure that it's not just captured in our CBDs of our inner cities, but Australians in the suburbs, small and medium enterprises in our economy, and Australians in the regions benefit from this technology. And thirdly, dealing with the risks and dealing with the harms. And that is what the AI Safety Institute has been commissioned to do. That is, of course, accompanied by a solid commitment from this government to not undermine copyright protections for Australian artists and other Australian content producers. You cite newspapers and television as well. That's our approach, and it hasn't changed.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Lambie, first supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. Big techs like Anthropic and OpenAI are valued in the billions. In fact, Google's Alphabet is worth $4 trillion. These companies can afford to pay for Australian copyright. Minister, what plans do you have to make big tech pay and to regulate AI so they will stop getting a free ride?
Thank you, Senator Lambie. Minister Ayres.
Well, there are no free rides in Australia, Senator Lambie, for people who want to use, like everybody else, whether it's big tech. Order. It seems like the usual sort of behavioural problem is replicated again down here.
Minister Ayres, please resume your seat. Senator McKim, come to order. Minister Ayres, please continue.
As the Attorney-General said first in October last year and has repeated consistently since, the government is not considering a text and data mining exception for Australia. We are not considering that as an option for Australia. We stand firmly behind Australia's creative industries and will continue to do so.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Lambie, second supplementary.
Thank you. Minister, last week you heard the Canadian PM encourage middle powers like Australia to invest in our Australian-made AI. This is not just a sovereignty issue, it's also a national security issue, and we still have no minister because it's so damn important, a Minister of AI. Canada has invested $4.4 billion. Meanwhile, we're letting big tech take Australians for a ride. Can the minister tell me why we aren't investing in Australian-made AI?
Thank you, Senator Lambie. Minister Ayres.
Just make the point, firstly, that Australia is an excellent place for artificial intelligence investment, both in digital infrastructure because of our vast reserves of solar and wind and storage backed by gas. That is what that sector wants to see. That is the power and energy equation that they want to see because it's the lowest cost for them. Because of our significant space, because of our proximity to fast-growing digital markets in our region, and also because of our secure governance and our stable, secure arrangements in security terms with partner economies. That offers...
Mr. Ayres. Senator Lambie.
To know why we aren't investing in AI in Australia, in our Australian firms.
Thank you. The Minister is being relevant to your question, Senator Lambie, and I'll continue to listen carefully.
And that's exactly the point, Senator Lambie. Australia is an attractive destination for investment.
Thank you, Minister.
We are not.
Senator David Pocock.
Thanks, President. My question is to the Finance Minister and Minister for Women, Senator Gallagher, representing the Minister for Social Services. Minister, in a very welcome move, your government released a month ago the first ever standalone plan to end violence against Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women and children, backed by $218.3 million in new funding over 4 years. How much of that funding will be invested in setting up ACOs to deliver community-led specialist support services that help Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women and families who are experiencing family, domestic and sexual violence in the ACT?
Thank you, Senator Pocock. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, and I thank Senator Pocock for the question. That I'm not sure I've got all of the detail in terms of being able to answer that, but the majority of the allocation to that plan, Our Ways, Strong Ways, Our Voices, which was a huge piece of work that has been delivered in partnership with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women across the country, as Senator Pocock said, backed by $218.3 million in new funding over 4 years. My understanding of that is that that funding will primarily be provided to Aboriginal community-controlled organisations to deliver community-led specialist support services as a commitment to the principles that underpin the plan, which is that ACOs are in a better position to deliver tailored support services to local communities. So that's primarily how the funding will be allocated to the national network of up to 40 Aboriginal community-controlled organisations to deliver those services. There may be exceptions to that where it's where for one reason or another that's the appropriate decision, but in partnership with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander organisations, the fundamental principles underpinning Our Ways, Strong Ways, Our Voices, as the first ever dedicated plan to end violence against Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women and children, has been to partner with those organisations that are best placed to deliver those support services, and it has been the matter of significant discussion since the national plan was implemented and agreed by states and territories that a specific plan that responded to the needs of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women was required, which has led to this plan being agreed and the funding to be allocated to it.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Pocock, first supplementary.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Minister. I really appreciate your work on this. I've been advised by the CEO of the Canberra Rape Crisis Centre that they face a cut to their funding of 60%. Meaning that First Nations victim survivors of sexual violence in the ACT will lose access to the specialist Nauru program they operate from June. Will there be a net increase or a net decrease in support for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women and families who are experiencing family, domestic and sexual violence in the ACT under this program?
Thank you, Senator Pocock. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. Well, I'll see if I can provide any further information, but we are putting additional resources into resourcing this dedicated plan, Our Ways, to make sure that we are responding to some of the level of needs that have been sought by the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community represented by those women's organisations. I understand there is, I've seen the story in the Canberra Times today around decisions they are making with the funding that's provided sometimes through the Commonwealth, but also their own funding, to put that out to a process for an ACO, an Aboriginal-controlled community organisation, to apply for the money that has been provided. But it really is a matter for the ACT government. From our point of view, we are putting in additional resources that are being provided to organisations and states and territories. If there's anything further I can provide, I will update the Senator.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Pocock, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Minister. Minister, what steps is the government taking to ensure that the ACT government funds services like the Canberra Rape Crisis Centre and DVCS beyond June this year? How are you ensuring that money is actually getting to the ground where it needs to get?
Thank you, Senator Pocock. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. And Senator Pocock asked a really important question, which is, we can provide additional resourcing, but we want to make sure that does flow on to services. That doesn't always mean that services that will always get, I guess, what the arrangements they have under contract for a certain period of time. Like, I know the Canberra Rape Crisis Centre, they're an amazing service as well, but I think, and I haven't spoken to the Minister for Women in the ACT about this particular decision, but from reading the article, I can understand about the having to look at what's being offered and looking at how we entrust Aboriginal-controlled community organisations to provide a level of service in line with the commitments we've made under our plan. And in relation to DVCS, and again, another amazing service here in the ACT, there is an ongoing issue which the Commonwealth is engaging with the ACT government on to make sure that that funding is provided to that organisation.
Senator Bell.
My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. On Monday, Labor's Energy Minister Chris Bowen told Australians that panic buying, not supply issues, was behind the fuel shortages across Australia, even as regional servos were already running out of diesel and turning people away. These predictable shortages are impacting our most critical food bowl in the election of Farah and exposing Labor's complete failure to secure and prioritise fuel supply and distribution when a crisis hits the system. Can the Minister advise when the Prime Minister still has confidence in Mr Bowen's management of fuel security, and if so, why, under Labor's emergency management plan, farmers and truckies who feed the nation are not guaranteed to be first in line for diesel ahead of city motorists?
Order. Senator Shoebridge, come to order. When senators are on their feet asking a question, they have the right to be heard in silence. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Bell. And I've been here long enough to see people campaign in the Senate for state elections and for by-elections, and I can say to you that I've never seen it actually have an effect on the ground, but you go your hardest, so that's fine. Secondly, the point I would make in terms of the track record of the government and Senator Gallagher went through it, I think, very clearly in the question she answered, that it is our government that established domestic fuel reserves for diesel, for petrol and for jet fuel. It is our government that put a gas reservation in place so more affordable gas goes to Australian households and industries. We introduced minimum stockpiling obligations so we could withstand energy supply shocks. And that does stand in contrast to Mr Taylor's decision, while he was the minister, to put Australian fuel reserves in Texas. I would. Sorry, I apologise. The minister is distracting me. What I would say to you, Senator, though, is the same thing I said to Senator Sullivan, which is that the advice to us very clearly is that we have as much fuel coming through our ports now as we did before the war began. It is the case that there is demand in some areas of our country, regional areas, but also in some different sectors, which differs from the normal patterns of demand. So obviously that does create a mismatch between supply and demand. It is a function of different demand patterns, not a function of supply, and we would encourage the Parliament to be responsible in how they engage with industry on this, given the national interest.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Bell, first supplementary.
Minister, you claim there is as much diesel in the country today as there was when this crisis started. But if that is true, will the government explain why, after a very predictable rise in demand during a crisis, Labor's fuel security system has broken down, and why, under Mr Bowen's watch, the very farmers who need that diesel to get this year's crops in the ground are being denied access to it?
Thank you, Senator Bell. Minister Wong.
And yes, producers of Australia's food and fibre do need the fuel that is required to produce that, which is why those opposite, including yourself, maybe shouldn't stoke fear in the community. Now, Senator, to be honest, I suppose it is one nation, so I do have to accept that is the modus operandi. And I would note that we have established domestic fuel reserves for diesel, petrol and jet fuel in Australia, minimum stockholding obligations. I know that Senator McKenzie is desperate to sort of intervene on your question, Senator, but you shouldn't let her. This is your question. You shouldn't let the National Party try and jump aboard the One Nation agenda, which is clearly what they are trying to do.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Bell, second supplementary.
Minister, Australians have seen predictable supply shocks before, but under Labor we now seem to have more sovereign capability to supply toilet paper than we do to supply critical fuels like diesel to meet the demand of our farmers and critical food production. What does that say about Australia's food security policies under the Albanese Labor government, and when will the Prime Minister supply actual fuel security for the people who feed and power this country?
Thank you, Senator Bell. Minister Wong.
Well, Senator, your party was very silent when the coalition failed to put in place minimum stockpiling obligations. Your party was very silent when they put Texas as where fuel reserves would be.
Minister Wong. Senator Bell.
Point of order relevance. The minister knows that we raised this when the coalition was in government too.
Senator Bell, that's not a point of order. Minister Wong.
Well, Senator, you engaged in a political attack. You're entitled to do that, and I'm entitled to respond. I'm entitled to respond. And the reality is that you have been very quiet as a party when Mr Taylor wanted to put fuel in Texas. You've been very quiet as a party when there was no minimum stockpiling obligation under coalition. You've been very quiet as a party whilst the coalition— actually, did they vote against the coal and gas price caps and energy bill relief? Did you vote against those as well? Oh, that's interesting. You voted against coal and gas price caps for Australians, and now you complain about price increases. I think the hypocrisy is on display, if I may say, Senator.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Sterle.
Sorry, I was interjecting on myself, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Climate Change and Energy, Senator Ayres. Global energy markets have been disrupted by the war in the Middle East. The export of oil and gas through the Straits of Hormuz has largely stopped. Iran has attacked energy infrastructure across the region, and energy producers are shutting production. Can the Minister please provide an update on energy and supply chain pressures? Can the Minister also outline the Albanese Labor government's actions thus far to protect the Australian economy and households?
Thank you, Senator Sterle. Minister Ayres.
Well, thanks, Senator Sterle. It's good to have a question actually from somebody with some practical experience of in particular diesel supplies in Western Australia, rather than the sort of besooted sort of fake political questions that came earlier on. The minimum stock holding guarantees a baseline level of domestic fuel stocks. This is held onshore in Australia or within our exclusive economic zone. That is a very different approach to the approach taken by the previous government, where the stock holding, to the extent that it existed at all, was like Waco, one of the team over there's favourite late-night documentaries, was like Waco, held in Texas. Held in Texas. That was Mr Taylor's approach to hold it in Texas. Our current stocks have not materially changed since the commencement of the conflict. 36 days of petrol, equivalent to about 1.56 billion litres of petrol. In terms of jet fuel, 29 days or 802 million litres of jet fuel. In terms of diesel, 32 days of diesel, about 2.97 billion litres of diesel. what the industry told Minister Bowen and I and the Minister for Agriculture and the Minister for Transport today is that there has been no real change in the stock holdings and the supply that Australia has. There has been some changes. There have been some changes in some areas that relate to demand behaviour.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Searle, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Resilient domestic energy markets and supply chains are crucial for protecting households and the economy from international shocks. Minister, what action has the Albanese Labor government taken to build energy and supply chain resilience? Is Australia more resilient to international shocks than it has been in the past?
Order across the chamber. Sorry, Senator Ayres, I haven't called you. Order. Senators Green and McKenzie, come to order. Both of you. Senator McKenzie, if you can't listen in silence, leave the chamber. Minister Ayres.
Thank you. Well, Australia is much more resilient in fuel security terms than it was when the Albanese government was elected first in 2022. We have introduced and implemented the minimum stockpile obligation so that Australia can withstand energy shocks. We are bringing in a gas market reservation to make sure that Australian gas is there for Australian users. And during the Ukraine crisis, we acted against the opposition of those opposite who only know how to oppose. Contrast this with Mr Taylor's record, who ignored advice to bring in a minimum stockholding obligation, who said you legislated it but you didn't do it. You sat on your hands. You sat on your hands and delivered nothing. You sent our fuel reserves to Texas and voted against coal and gas price caps, and led a party that saw 4 out of 6 petrol refineries close.
Thank you, Minister Ayres. Senator Sterle, second supplementary.
Thanks, President. During times of global turmoil, Australians look to their political leaders to protect the national interest and for clear and calm guidance. Minister, why is it important to provide this leadership and advice?
Thank you, Senator Sterle. Minister Ayres.
Well, President, once again, the Liberals and Nationals and One Nation have disgraced themselves over the last 2 weeks. When Australians look to this place for calm, resolute leadership, what they see on one half of the chamber is a desperate ploy for partisan advantage every time there is a national challenge. What Australians want to see when there is a national challenge is political leaders acting in the national interest. And there's a bit of a cycle here. National challenge emerges. It is greeted by Mr Taylor and his friends with outrage and anger and division and misinformation. And then it moves on and the stocks of the Liberals and Nationals get lower. Then we meet the next national challenge and there is anger and outrage and misinformation and disinformation, and you sink lower still.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator McDonald.
My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Climate Change and Energy, Senator Ayres. Last night, the Shell service station at Upper Mount Gravatt in Brisbane ran out of unleaded 91 and unleaded 95. Ooh. Minister, isn't that clear evidence of a fuel supply problem?
Thank you, Senator McDonald. I'll just wait for silence in the chamber. Order. Minister Ayres.
Well, it certainly isn't. As I indicated in my answer before, it is important for these matters to be asserted calmly and with a basic level of information.
And honesty.
36 days of petrol has not changed since the beginning of the war. 1.56 billion litres of petrol. In relation to jet fuel, 29 days worth of jet fuel We'll get to
Minister
Mount Gravatt.
Ayres.
Don't you worry about that.
Minister Ayres, please resume your seat. I'm just waiting for silence. Senator McDonald.
Thank you. On relevance, going nowhere near my very tightly worded question.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator McDonald. The minister is being relevant to the question, and I'll. It is incredibly disrespectful. I just had Senator McDonald on her feet calling a point of order. She was short and succinct and to the point, which many of you are not. As I was answering the point of order, Minister Wong, Senator McKenzie and others chose to then just start shouting across the chamber. That is rude and disrespectful to me and this Senate. Senator McDonald, I will listen carefully, and if the minister is not being relevant to your question, I will call him to your question. Senator Ayres.
I understand why members of the Coalition and One Nation find the assertion of the facts so offensive in this environment. That's enough from you, I reckon. 32 days of diesel.
Order.
32 days of diesel.
Order.
Honestly,
Order.
it just goes on and on.
That response was absolutely out of order. I had not finished. I've only just started. That response was out of order, absolutely out of order. Shouting so loud that you could not hear me try and bring the Senate to order. Senator Ayres, you withdraw that comment.
I absolutely will.
And there will be silence for the rest of question time. Senator Ayres, please continue.
There is, as I was trying to indicate, 32 days of diesel supply left in Australia, 2.97 billion litres of diesel. Now, those amounts have not fundamentally changed since the conflict in Iran began. What has changed, Senator Canavan, if you're going to join the sort of yelling over there, what has changed is there has been some consumer behaviour that has changed. Some consumers are purchasing, it was reported to me in the meeting that was held recently, 4 to 5 times the amount of diesel or the amount of petrol. Now, why would people be engaging in that kind of conduct? Because there are people over there.
Minister Ayres, please resume your seat. I ask for silence. Minister Ayres, please continue.
All of us have a responsibility here to conduct ourselves in the national interest, to report the facts accurately. Sure, hold the government to account.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator McDonald, first supplementary.
Last week, the Resources Minister claimed fuel prices were holding steady. That claim has collapsed. Prices have surged to 219.9 cents a litre and petrol stations are running dry. This morning, the Minister for Climate Change and Energy warned against panic buying. Minister, isn't this just a government that cannot manage fuel disruption and is now trying to pin the blame on ordinary Australians?
That's right. Thank you, Senator McDonald. Minister Ayres.
Is that what you want?
Well, President, what's required when there is a national challenge, like a war in the Middle East, is calm, resolute, effective leadership. Not running around on social media trying to amplify problems and spread misinformation, which is what some of you have done.
Please resume your seat. Senator McKenzie, I'm not quite sure which part of order you think doesn't apply to you, but it does. Minister Ayres, please continue.
And I suppose the thing that outrages those of us on this side is that those of you who did so little when you're in government, when Senator Canavan behaves as if he wasn't there, he was the resources minister. He was the resources minister. Like the mouse that roared. The mouse that roared did nothing.
Senator Ayres. I'm sorry, Senator McDonald. I'm waiting for silence. I know you're on your feet. Order. Order. Senator McDonald.
This is so off topic. People are desperate for an answer and the minister won't address it.
Senator McDonald, you can't just stand. You need to indicate there's a point of order.
Relevant.
Thank you. I will draw
Irrelevant.
the minister to your question. Minister Ayres.
Well, the job here is to assert the facts calmly. We have done that, is to work with industry, with farmers, with the fertiliser sector, with the fuel industry. We are doing that and we'll continue to do it in the national interest.
The time for answering has expired. Senator McDonald, second supplementary.
Minister, isn't the truth that prices are rising, pumps are running dry, and instead of admitting there's a problem, the government's lecturing Australians, lecturing motorists for trying to protect their families and their businesses?
Thank you, Senator McDonald. Minister Ayres.
Well, that question did come dangerously close, I have to say, to encouraging people to go and panic buy. Came dangerously close to that. And what is going on here is a group of Liberals and Nationals and One Nation who have not internalised the lessons of the last 3.5 years. Like, every time you try and drive division, Australians walk away from you. Every time you hyperventilate with partisan division, Australians walk away from you, and you get smaller and less relevant and less effective and more hateful and more angry and more shouty.
Minister Ayres, please resume your seat. Senators on my left, it is not your job to try and outshout the minister. Minister Ayres.
The question for you is, when will you start listening to Australians, particularly the Australians who used to support you? When will you start behaving as if you are seeking the mantle of national leadership instead of being a fringe right-wing extremist rebel?
Thank you, Minister. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. I ask that further questions be placed on notice.